You woke up this morning. And before your eyes fully opened, before you said a single word to yourself, before you even remembered who you were, you reached for your phone. Don't lie to yourself. You know it's true. And in that one moment, that tiny, automatic, half-conscious gesture, you handed over the most powerful thing you will ever own. Your mind. To an algorithm. To strangers. To noise. And here's what nobody is telling you. That moment right there, is not a small thing. It is not a harmless habit. It is not just how things are now. It is the reason you feel scattered by 10 a.m. It is the reason your ambitions keep dying in the draft folder of your life. It is the reason that, at the end of the day, you lay back down in the same bed, look up at the same ceiling, and feel less. Like something is being slowly drained from you, and you can't figure out where the leak is. The ancient Stoics, philosophers who lived in a world of war, plague, political collapse, and public execution, cracked the code on exactly this feeling 2,000 years ago. And almost nobody is actually using what they discovered. Not the watered-down version you have seen on motivational posters. Not the just think positive repackaging. The real habits. The hard ones. The ones that will make you deeply uncomfortable before they set you free. This is not a feel-good video. This is an intervention. Let's be honest about what's happening to people right now. Not in some abstract, society is struggling kind of way. I mean specifically. I mean the kind of thing you feel in your chest at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when you realize you have been sitting in the same chair for 4 hours and you have nothing to show for it. The kind of thing you feel when someone criticizes you online and you spend the next 3 hours rehearsing arguments in your head instead of living your actual life. Here's what the modern American experience looks like for most people between 18 and 45 right now. You wake up tired, not because you didn't sleep enough, but because the sleep you got wasn't real rest. You were half dreaming about unread emails, group chats, things you should have said, things people might be thinking about you. Your nervous system never actually powered down. You get up. You scroll. Within 4 minutes, you have passively consumed the anger of a political argument, the envy trigger of someone's vacation photos, the low-grade anxiety of breaking news, and 3 advertisements specifically designed by behavioral psychologists to make you feel like your current life isn't enough. And that's before breakfast. By midday, you have made 17 micro-decisions about things that don't actually matter. You have reacted emotionally to at least 2 things that, in 6 months, you will not remember. You have checked your phone over 40 times. You have done the mental equivalent of trying to build a house while someone repeatedly kicks over your foundation. By evening, you are exhausted. Genuinely, bone-deep exhausted. But not from doing hard things. From avoiding hard things while constantly being reminded they exist. And the cruel irony? The harder you try to escape this cycle, the more content you consume about self-improvement, the more productivity hacks you stockpile, the more podcasts you queue up, the deeper you sink into it. Because you are using the same distracted, reactive, dopamine-chasing mind to try to fix the distracted, reactive, dopamine-chasing mind. You can't put out a fire with gasoline. The Stoics understood something that we have nearly forgotten entirely. That the battlefield is not out there. It has never been out there. The battlefield is the 6 inches between your ears. And if you don't learn to control that territory, completely, ruthlessly, with discipline and self-awareness, everything else in your life will be built on sand. The 5 habits we are about to go through are not trending on TikTok. They are not in the top 10 of any productivity listicle. They are largely ignored, consistently misunderstood, and quietly practiced by the small percentage of people who seem to move through the world with a kind of unshakable, infuriating calm. You have met those people. Maybe you have resented them a little. Wondered what they know that you don't. This is what they know. The first habit: stop narrating your wounds. Here is a sentence that might rearrange something in your brain. You are not your story about what happened to you. But most people spend their entire lives becoming an expert in that story, polishing it, defending it, making sure everyone understands just how hard things have been. The Stoics called this prosoke, self-attention. But not the self-attention of self-pity. The ruthless, clear-eyed kind. The kind where you watch your own mind the way a scientist watches an experiment. Detached. Honest. Unflinching. Most people ignore this habit because it's terrifying. It is much easier, infinitely easier, to keep building the case for why your life is the way it is because of what was done to you. The bad childhood. The unfair boss. The partner who left. The city that doesn't have opportunities. The economy. The system. Some of those things may be completely true. The Stoics never denied that bad things happen to people. Marcus Aurelius lost children. Epictetus was born into slavery. Seneca was exiled, recalled, made one of the most powerful men in Rome, then ordered to kill himself by the same emperor he mentored. They were not naive about suffering. But they made a distinction, a critical distinction, that most people today have never been taught. There is what happened. And then there is what you keep saying to yourself about what happened. And those two things are not the same. They feel the same. They live in the same emotional neighborhood. But they are fundamentally different in nature, and only one of them is in your control. Here's how this silently destroys your life. When you keep narrating your wounds, when you retell the story of your hardship, rehearse your grievances, replay the moments where life was unfair, you are not processing pain. You are manufacturing it. Fresh. Every single time. Your nervous system does not know the difference between something that is happening and something you are thinking about in vivid detail. When you replay the memory of someone humiliating you, your body releases the same stress hormones as if it's happening right now. You are, quite literally, putting yourself through the trauma again. Voluntarily. Repeatedly. And here's the thing: the Stoics understood that neuroscience has only recently confirmed: the more you rehearse a thought pattern, the more automatic it becomes. The more automatic it becomes, the more it feels like reality rather than choice. You start to believe the wound is who you are. And then, this is the part that will keep you up at night if you really let it sink in, you start making decisions from that wound. You stay small because hurt people expect to be hurt again. You don't take the risk because someone once told you that you weren't enough. You push people away because you have told yourself the story of abandonment so many times that it feels like prophecy rather than history. The Stoic practice here is not to pretend the pain didn't happen. It's to separate the event from the editorial. When Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, a book, remember, that was never meant to be published, a private journal of a man trying to govern an empire while also governing himself, he writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't writing that for us. He was writing it to himself. Because he needed to hear it. Because the temptation to be consumed by the narrative of injustice, difficulty, and suffering was just as real for him as it is for you. The habit is this: catch yourself narrating. Notice when you are telling the story again. Not to someone else, to yourself. In the shower. On the drive. In the space between sleeping and waking. Notice when you are actively maintaining the case for why you are stuck, why you are limited, why things are hard. And then ask the question the Stoics considered the most powerful weapon in the human arsenal. Is this thought serving me? Or am I serving it? The second habit: practice the art of doing nothing, deliberately. This one sounds like the opposite of what you need. Which is exactly why it's so important. You live in a culture that has turned busyness into a moral virtue. Being busy means you are valuable. Being idle means you are lazy. Having a packed schedule means you are serious about your life. Having white space in your calendar means you are not working hard enough. And so you fill every gap. Waiting in line, phone out. Eating lunch, screen on. Driving, podcast playing. Going to sleep, show running in the background. 5 minutes alone with your thoughts, unbearable. Actively avoided. The Stoics had a practice they called odium, deliberate, purposeful stillness. Time carved out specifically to do nothing but think. Not meditate in the Instagram sense, not journal in the productivity system sense. Just sit with the contents of your own mind. Undistracted. Unmedicated by stimulation. Seneca wrote about this with an urgency that feels almost desperate, almost like he was writing it for us specifically. Retire into yourself as much as possible. Not from the world. Into yourself. And the reason most people cannot do this, the reason this habit is almost universally ignored in 2025, is that when you actually sit alone with your mind, you find out what's in there. And that is horrifying for most people. Because what's in there, when you stop running, is the truth. The truth about the relationship you know isn't working. The truth about the career that's eating your soul. The truth about the pattern you keep repeating. The truth about what you actually want versus what you have been performing wanting because it looked good to other people. Your phone is not actually an entertainment device. It is an avoidance device. It is the most sophisticated, perfectly engineered system for helping you never have to be alone with yourself that has ever existed in human history. And avoidance has a cost. Always. The bill comes due. Jung called it the shadow, the parts of yourself you push into the dark because you don't know what to do with them. The Stoics called it lack of self-knowledge. Either way, the diagnosis is the same: what you refuse to examine in the light will control you from the dark. Here's how this destroys your life without you noticing. You spend years staying so busy, so stimulated, so distracted, that you never develop what the Stoics considered the foundation of a good life: the ability to sit comfortably inside your own existence. And because you never develop that, you become dependent on external validation, on constant entertainment, on other people's energy to feel okay about your own life. You become a person who cannot be alone. And a person who cannot be alone cannot be trusted with real freedom. Because the moment the noise stops, the moment the job ends, the relationship ends, the distraction is removed, they collapse. Completely. Because there was never anything underneath the busyness. Just a very elaborate strategy for not finding out. The practice the Stoics prescribe is deceptively simple and genuinely difficult. 20 minutes. Every day. Phone in another room. Sit. No agenda. No productivity. No guided voice telling you what to think about. Just you and the interior of your own life. Let the discomfort come. Let the thoughts surface. Let the truth start to speak. Because the man who can sit alone with himself, truly alone, truly still, is a man that nothing external can shake. You cannot manipulate someone with silence if they are comfortable with silence. You cannot control someone with distraction if they don't need distraction. Stillness is not weakness. It is the ultimate competitive advantage in a world where everyone else is running. Let me share a story of a man who couldn't stop winning. His name was Nick. And from the outside, from the very outside, Nick had won. At 31, he was a senior product manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas. He had a downtown apartment that cost more per month than his parents had made in a year when he was growing up in rural Ohio. He had a girlfriend who was beautiful and kind. He had a group of friends who respected him. He had a gym membership he used 4 days a week. He had a therapist he saw twice a month. He was, by every measurable standard, a success. And he was miserable. Not dramatically miserable. Not crying on the floor miserable. The worst kind. The quiet, low-grade, persistent kind. The kind that lives in the back of your throat and tastes like something's wrong but you can't name it. The kind that makes you check your phone at 11:47 p.m. not because you are expecting anything, but because the alternative, lying in the dark with your own thoughts, feels like standing on the edge of something. Nick had been running since he was 17. He would run from the small town where he would felt invisible. Run toward grades, then achievements, then salary figures, then metrics, then quarterly goals. Always the next thing. Always the next marker. The next level. And every time he hit one, he would feel the spike, the dopamine, the approval, the LinkedIn congratulations, and then the flatness would return. Faster each time. The spikes getting shorter. The flatness getting longer. His girlfriend, Sarah, started saying things like, "You are here but you are not here." He would nod. He would apologize. He would be present for 3 days and then drift back into the screen, the work chat, the endless scroll of news and noise. The thing that finally cracked him open wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday afternoon in February. He was sitting in a meeting about a meeting, which is its own special kind of corporate purgatory, and he realized he hadn't looked anyone in the eye for the entire 45 minutes. He would been half present, half somewhere on his phone, mentally rehearsing a Slack message, thinking about whether his last performance review had been coded as praise or subtle criticism, composing the narrative of his career in his head the way a defense attorney composes an opening statement. And then the woman across the table, a junior designer named Priya who had only been at the company for 3 months, said something that sliced right through the noise. She said, simply, to no one in particular, "I just wonder if any of this is actually real." She was talking about a product feature. But Nick heard something else. He drove home that night and didn't turn on the podcast. For the first time in what he estimated might be 2 years, he sat in 45 minutes of Austin traffic in complete silence. And what came up, what surfaced the moment there was nothing to drown it out, was a grief he hadn't known was there. Grief for the version of himself he would had at 19, reading books for no reason, sitting on his parents' porch, feeling the particular quality of summer evenings in Ohio with no agenda and no metric and no performance. The version of himself that had wanted to write. That had felt things fully, even when the things were hard. He would traded that person in for a more successful model. And the successful model was running on empty. He didn't do anything dramatic. He didn't quit his job or move to a monastery. He did something much harder and much more stoic. He started paying attention. He bought a used copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations at a used bookstore off South Congress, the kind of bookstore that smells like honest time, and he started reading 15 minutes every morning. Not on his phone. A physical book. Before the email. Before the news. Before the algorithm got its hooks in. And what he found in those pages didn't feel like ancient philosophy. It felt like someone had been watching him. Confine yourself to the present. Do not indulge in dreams of what you have not. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. He started what he called, privately, his honest hour. Every evening, before dinner, he would sit without his phone for 30 minutes and just account for his day. Not what he would accomplished. Not what he would produced. But what he would actually experienced. What moments had felt real. What reactions he would had that embarrassed him when examined clearly. Where he would been performing versus being. It was uncomfortable for the first 2 weeks. Genuinely, sitting on hot coals uncomfortable. His mind was like a city that had never had a curfew, it didn't know how to quiet down. Thoughts crashed into each other. Anxieties filed in. The unfinished business of years lined up, patient and waiting, as if they would always known he would come back. He let them come. This is the Stoic move that nobody tells you about. You don't fight the thoughts. You don't white-knuckle your way to peace. You just watch. You become the observer. You sit with the discomfort the way you would sit with a storm, not trying to stop it, just recognizing that you are not the storm. Around week 3, something shifted. He couldn't explain it exactly. But he started responding instead of reacting. When his manager sent a loaded email at 9 p.m., he didn't type the immediate defensive reply. He put the phone down. Felt the surge of adrenaline. Let it pass. Replied in the morning with something measured and clear. The situation resolved in 5 minutes. The old version would have spent 6 hours spiraling. When Sarah did something that triggered his abandonment pattern, something small, a cancelled plan, he noticed himself constructing the old narrative: here it comes. She's pulling away. This is how it always goes. And instead of disappearing into that story, he said it out loud to her. I am noticing I am doing the thing where I build a case against us based on one small thing. It's not about you. She looked at him with an expression he would never quite seen on her face before. Something like relief. He stopped narrating his childhood wounds as the explanation for his current life. He still talked about them, in therapy, in honest conversation, but he stopped using them as the central plot of a story he was still writing. He separated the wound from the conclusion. What happened to you is not a verdict on what's possible for you. He didn't become a Stoic saint. He still scrolled too much sometimes. Still fell into comparison traps. Still had weeks where the flatness returned and the old noise seemed very appealing. But he stopped being afraid of the silence. And when you stop being afraid of the silence, you can hear yourself think again. 6 months after that Tuesday meeting, Nick was sitting on his apartment balcony at 6 in the morning, earlier than he used to get up, before the day had a chance to be anything, watching the Austin skyline pick up the first gray light. No phone. No podcast. Just the particular sound of a city waking up, and the particular sensation of being fully present inside his own life. And he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, exactly. Deeper than happiness. Steadier. He felt like himself. The third habit: choose your difficulty. Here is the truth that modern comfort culture does not want you to hear. The human nervous system was not designed for ease. It was designed for challenge. The human nervous system was not designed for ease. It was designed for challenge. It was shaped, over hundreds of thousands of years, to function best when facing meaningful difficulty, not crushing, random, unjust difficulty, but chosen difficulty. Difficulty with a purpose. When you remove all meaningful difficulty from your life, when you optimize for comfort, convenience, and the path of least resistance, you don't get peace. You get anxiety. You get restlessness. You get the creeping, indefinable sense that something is wrong, that your life is smaller than it should be, that you are somehow less than the person you were supposed to become. The Stoics called this practice voluntary hardship, and they were intensely specific about it. Seneca wrote about practicing cold water in winter, walking outside in bad weather, sleeping on a harder surface, going without a meal. Not because they were masochists, but because they understood something about the relationship between comfort and fear. When you always take the easy path, every deviation from easy becomes terrifying. When you deliberately practice difficulty, you build what Seneca called a friendship with hardship, and once hardship is your friend, nothing can hold you hostage. Here's how its absence is quietly dismantling your life. You feel anxiety about the presentation at work because you have been avoiding the discomfort of preparation. You feel anxiety in relationships because you have been avoiding the discomfort of honest conversation. You feel anxious about your health because you have been avoiding the discomfort of discipline. You feel anxious about your future because you have been avoiding the discomfort of making real decisions. Avoidance is the breeding ground for anxiety. They are not separate problems. They are the same problem with different faces. Every time you choose comfort over the necessary difficulty, your brain files a report. It says, that difficult thing, you couldn't handle it. Better avoid it. And the zone of what feels manageable shrinks a little. The walls move in a little. And you don't notice it happening because each individual retreat seems reasonable, seems self-compassionate, seems like just giving yourself a break. But it compounds. A year of small retreats and you are living in a room much smaller than the life you were capable of. The Stoic practice is not to become a monk or an ascetic. It's to deliberately, regularly, intentionally choose difficulty in areas you have been avoiding. Cold showers as a proxy for doing hard things first. Skipping a meal not to lose weight but to prove to yourself that discomfort won't kill you. Having the conversation you have been postponing. Doing the creative work before you check the validation metrics. Every time you choose the harder thing voluntarily, you are making a deposit in the account of self-trust. And self-trust, not confidence, not motivation, not inspiration, self-trust is the actual currency of a good life. The fourth habit, audit your circle without apology. This one is going to make some people uncomfortable. Good. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, a man who commanded armies, governed millions, sat at the center of the ancient world's greatest machine of power, wrote in his private journal, without ceremony, the first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. Look at the people in your life. Know them for what they are. Not what you need them to be. Not what they used to be. Not the potential you keep insisting is there. What they actually, demonstrably, consistently are. Here's what the Stoics understood about human influence that we have completely lost in a culture that treats all relationships as sacred and all distance as betrayal. You are, with terrifying precision, an average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not philosophically. Neurologically. Mirror neurons. Behavioral contagion. Emotional entrainment. The people you are around the most are constantly uploading their patterns into your operating system. Their anxiety becomes familiar to your nervous system. Their ceiling becomes your ceiling. Their way of interpreting the world becomes the water you swim in. Most people are walking around with someone else's fear in their chest and calling it their own personality. The reason this habit is ignored is that it requires you to make choices that look like cruelty from the outside. Pulling back from a friendship that has quietly become a venue for mutual complaint and stagnation. Loving a family member from a careful distance because their chaos is contagious. Stopping the performance of closeness with people who drain you, not because they are bad people, but because the relationship has become a net negative in both directions. Our culture has no good language for this. We only have extremes, toxic people, on one end, ride or die, loyalty on the other. The Stoic middle path, careful, deliberate, honest curation of your inner circle, looks selfish in the Instagram era. But here's what nobody talks about. The resentment that builds when you keep the wrong people close is not just privately painful. It leaks. It leaks into your work, your health, your capacity for joy, your willingness to take risks. It is one of the most silent, pervasive forms of self-betrayal there is. Epictetus, the man who was literally owned by another human being, who had zero control over the external conditions of his life, wrote with complete clarity about the one freedom that cannot be taken, the freedom to choose what you give your attention, your energy, and your presence to. If a man in chains could exercise that freedom, what is your excuse? This is not a call to become cold. The Stoics were not cold. Marcus Aurelius writes endlessly, beautifully, about his deep love for the people around him, about his tenderness toward his children, about the genuine joy of human connection. It is a call to be honest. Because the most loving thing you can do for someone, including yourself, is to stop pretending that a relationship is something it isn't. The fifth habit: stop living in rehearsal mode. This is the one that will sit with you the longest. Somewhere in your life, you have a version of yourself that you are going to become. Eventually. When the circumstances are right. When you have more money, more time, more clarity, more confidence, more of whatever it is that you have decided you need before you can actually begin. You are waiting for the conditions to be perfect before you start treating your life like it's real. The Stoics called this perhaps the most dangerous delusion a human being can hold. Not because ambition is wrong. Not because preparation is wrong. But because the gap between who you are now and who you are planning to become is the space where your actual life is happening. And you are absent from it. Marcus Aurelius, again, in that private journal, in the middle of wars and plague and political crisis, keeps returning to the same theme with almost desperate repetition: confine yourself to the present. The present moment is all you ever actually have. Everything else is either memory or imagination. Here's the quiet devastation of rehearsal mode. You are not actually getting ready to live. You are living, right now, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every year you spend waiting is a year of your one irreplaceable life. The cells are aging. The windows are closing. The people you love are aging too. The version of your child that is 4 years old right now will never be 4 again. The version of your parents that can still come to dinner exists right now and will not always exist. The Stoics had a practice called memento mori, which is usually translated as "remember that you will die," and usually received as morbid, which entirely misses the point. It's not a death obsession. It's a life obsession. It's the radical, clarifying practice of holding your own mortality next to your daily choices and asking, does this matter? Is this real? Am I here? The man who truly understands that his time is finite does not squander Tuesday. He does not phone scroll his way through breakfast. He does not postpone the conversation, the creative work, the vulnerable moment. Not because he's in a frantic hurry, but because he has a relationship with urgency that most people are terrified to develop. Think about the last time you were genuinely close to your own mortality. A car accident. A health scare. A loss. Remember how real everything felt in those days afterward? Remember how the stupid small stuff, the petty arguments, the social media dramas, the things you would been anxious about, just dissolved? Remember how you called someone you would been meaning to call? Looked at the sky? Actually tasted your food? That clarity is not the exception. The Stoics argue it should be the baseline. Memento mori is not about living in dread. It is about living in gratitude for the reality of right now, combined with the fierce refusal to waste what's been given to you. The habit is simple and it will change your life if you do it seriously. Every morning, before the phone, before the email, before the noise, sit for 2 minutes and say, out loud, or in writing, I will die. I don't know when. What does that mean for today? Not as an exercise in despair. As an exercise in clarity. And then act like you mean it. You have heard the ideas. Now here's the work. Not abstract. Not someday. Starting today. The first thing you do tomorrow morning, before the phone leaves the nightstand, is read one passage from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Any passage. 3 sentences minimum. Read it slowly. Read it like it was written specifically to you, because in every practical sense, it was. Let it be the first thing your mind wraps around each morning before the algorithm gets there. This is not a reading habit. This is a mental hygiene practice. You brush your teeth before the world gets its hooks in. You do this for the same reason. Second, implement what I am calling the evening account. Every night before sleep, 5 minutes, not 50, you review your day not for productivity, but for quality of mind. Ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I react instead of respond today? Where did I act from fear instead of from clarity? What did I choose to ignore in myself that I need to stop ignoring? Write it down or speak it out loud. The act of articulating what the mind has been doing is, itself, a Stoic practice. It interrupts the automation. It breaks the spell of unconscious pattern. You cannot change what you cannot see, and the evening account is how you learn to see yourself clearly. Third, choose one thing every day that is harder than necessary. This is not about punishment. It is about keeping your nervous system acquainted with difficulty so that difficulty stops being the thing that stops you. Cold shower. Walk when you could drive. Hard conversation you have been postponing. Skip the snooze alarm. Finish the creative work before the validation check. Small, consistent, deliberate. Uncomfortable done daily becomes comfortable. And comfortable with difficulty means nothing can hold your life hostage. Fourth, run a relationship audit. Not emotionally, not dramatically, clinically. Look at the 5 to 8 people you spend the most time with, digitally and physically. For each one, ask, after spending time with this person, do I feel more like myself or less like myself? More capable or less capable? Expanded or contracted? The answers are not instructions to cut people off. They are information. What you do with that information is your responsibility. Fifth, and this one will feel strange at first, and then necessary, and eventually indispensable, carry a physical reminder of impermanence. Not morbid. Practical. A small notebook, a worn object, something that every time you touch it pulls you back to the present moment and the finite nature of your time. The Stoics wore rings inscribed with memento mori. You can use a cracked stone from a garden, a photograph of someone who died but lived fully, a word written in your own handwriting on the inside of your wrist. The point is not the object. The point is the interruption of sleepwalking. Because you, like all of us, are sleepwalking through significant portions of your life. You are present in body and absent in mind. The reminder is not meant to depress you. It is meant to wake you up. To pull you back into the one moment where your life is actually happening. Right now. This moment. Not the rehearsal. There's a version of this video where I just encourage you. Where I say, you are doing great, these are hard times, just implement a couple of these ideas and things will get better. Subscribe for more content. That's not this video. Because the truth, the Stoic truth, the honest truth, is that information is not your problem. You have access to more wisdom, more self-help content, more psychological insight than anyone in the history of the human species. You know you should put the phone down. You know you should eat better, sleep more, exercise, have the hard conversations, pursue the meaningful work, live more presently. You know. Knowing is not the gap. The gap is the distance between knowing and doing. And that gap, that specific, maddening, humbling distance, is a character issue. Not an intelligence issue. Not a circumstance issue. Not a resource issue. A character issue. The Stoics were brutal about this in the most compassionate way possible. They believed, deeply, completely, in the capacity of human beings to change. Not through inspiration. Not through motivation. Not through waiting for the right feeling or the right moment or the right set of conditions. Through practice. Through showing up, imperfectly, repeatedly, to the habits that build the person you want to become. You are building yourself every single day. The question is not whether you are building yourself. You are. The only question is which version you are building. Every time you reach for the phone instead of sitting with your thoughts, you are building the version that can't be alone. Every time you narrate your wounds instead of examining them, you are building the version that stays stuck. Every time you choose comfort over necessary difficulty, you are building the version that shrinks. Every time you stay in the wrong room because leaving feels like betrayal, you are building the version that resents. Every time you stay in rehearsal mode instead of acting, you are building the version that runs out of time. And those versions don't announce themselves. They don't show up one morning with a sign around their neck. They accumulate quietly, in the daily choices nobody is watching, in the moments between moments, in the choices that seem small until the day you look in the mirror and wonder how you got here. That day comes for everyone. The Stoics just ask that it not be too late when it does. Marcus Aurelius commanded the largest military force in the known world. He controlled the economy of a continent. He had every comfort, every luxury, every convenience that the ancient world could provide. And he wrote, "For no one, for himself, for his own struggling mind, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He didn't write that because things were going well. He wrote it because things were hard. Because the plague had come. Because the wars wouldn't end. Because people he trusted had betrayed him. Because the empire was fracturing at the edges. Because he was tired in ways that no amount of sleep could fix. He wrote it because he needed to remind himself, needed to write it down in ink, with his own hand, so it would be more real than the noise, that the difficulty was not a detour. It was the road. Your phone addiction, your emotional reactivity, your distraction, your avoidance, your rehearsal mode, your wound narratives, these are not things that are happening to you. They are things you are doing. And because you are doing them, you can stop doing them. Not all at once. Not perfectly. Not in a blinding moment of transformation that you will post about later. One practice. One morning. One choice to sit in the discomfort a little longer before reaching for the escape. One decision to stop narrating the wound and start examining it. One day where you choose the difficult thing first. One conversation where you respond from your values instead of your fear. One morning where the first thought you have belongs to you instead of an algorithm. That's the whole thing. That's all of Stoicism, reduced to its bones. Show up to your actual life. Not the one in the future when everything is figured out. This one. Today. This messy, unfinished, impermanent, irreplaceable life. Marcus Aurelius could not have imagined the specific shape of your struggle. He could not have imagined smartphones or social media algorithms or the particular texture of American exhaustion in the 21st century. But he knew something about what it means to be human inside of chaos. He knew that the mind untrained is a liability. And the mind trained, disciplined, examined, honest, awake, is the only real form of freedom there has ever been. You don't need better circumstances to start. You just need the decision. Right now. Not after this video. Right now. The life you have been rehearsing? Stop rehearsing. Start living. Most people will hear this. Feel something. And go right back to their old habits. Don't be most people. Start today. And if you want more real, uncomfortable truth like this, subscribe.